Hello and welcome to the Makers Studio. We have a fantastic lineup for you today, including our very special guest artist, Gill Towell. Gill has been running GillyMac Designs since 2014, an award-winning online and in-person sewing tutoring business where she teaches children and adults to love sewing. Today in the Makers Studio, Gill will be showing us a project which she uses to introduce sewers of any age to machine sewing. She'll also be sharing her thoughts on the best ways to engage children who are interested in sewing. Also joining us today at the discussion table is quilter and tutor Anita Birtles. Anita loves recycling and reusing, which has led to her celebrated scrap projects. And with Anita at the table is our regular contributor, Jane Brogan. Jane is a Janome sewing machine technical expert and educator. So let's go meet the makers. So we're at our highly decorative discussion table and let's meet our experts, Anita, Jane and Gill. Fantastic to see you all. How are you all?
Very well.
Great to be here.
Excellent.
Yep.
Great to have you here. Gill, thanks so much for your time
It's a pleasure.
today. What are you going to be demonstrating today?
So I thought I'd demonstrate today a starter project that I use with all sorts of different ages of children who come into the studio. So we'll be able to make a small zip pouch, and it's a sort of quilt as you go method, and they go home really happy they've made something that they can recognise and give away or keep.
That sounds fantastic. So Jane, what are you interested to hear about today?
It's how you can engage with children on very many different levels and abilities, which will be quite interesting to know.
What about you, Anita?
Well, again, it's the children and the coping with the different age groups and how you do a sort of multi-age group courses.
So hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions. Gill, are you ready to begin
I
your
am
demonstration?
ready.
Let's get over
Let's
to the
go.
sewing machine then. Gill and I are now at the makers table, and Gill, just remind us once again what you're going to be making today.
So what we're going to make is we're going to make a small zip pouch, and it's a way in which I can give it to any age of child and gauge whether they are able to sew, how far they've come in their sewing journey so far. It's a fun thing to do. It just uses scrap fabric and they always go home with something nice to make.
That's wonderful, isn't it? And these can be used for anything, can't they? Pencil cases, makeup bags.
iPad covers.
Of course, yeah.
And you can make them big. I'll show you later on, I'll show you some that I've made that sort of developed the idea. But you can make them bigger or smaller, so they could go home and say, I want to make some coin purses, or so they can take this idea and go home and make them as well.
On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being really difficult, how would you grade this project?
Probably 3.
3. Oh, yeah, I can make it.
Perfect, yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So what's the first thing we need to do then?
Okay, so so the project is to create with scrap fabric. We're just going to create a front here. I've already created a back, so I've created one already. So what we need is we need some wadding. Let's put these out of the way. We need some wadding, and we just need some scrap pieces of fabric. So I've cut them into just strips, but they don't have to be long strips and they don't all have to be the same size, and they can all be a little bit random. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a strip in the middle, and then we're going to start to build round, a bit like the numbers on a clock.
Okay.
Go round and actually quilt them onto this little bit of wadding. Now normally you would have with wadding, you'd have something underneath, but for a quick project like this, it's not necessary for the children. They can just go straight onto the wadding.
Okay, let's talk about the machine that you're using today. Is this the sort of setup that you would have working with children?
Yeah, so I've got 6 of these Janome 230 DCs, and they're my workhorses in the sewing school. So the children will come in, depending on the age, they will either get them out and set them up, or sometimes they'll be set up ready for them. Normally, if they can lift them, they set them up themselves, but if there's a danger of them dropping them, then I'll pop them on the table. Even the tiny ones, once they're popped on the table, we'll make sure they've got the right foot on. They know that they need to take the bobbin out and put it back in because they don't know who put it in before them, so they need to make sure that they're responsible for that. So they are absolute powerhouses. So in the studio, you can have, in one day, you could have maybe a 9-year-old making a pencil case. You could then in the evening have an adult working on them, making a coat or making a bag. So they do everything.
Really versatile machines.
Do you find with those as well, especially with the children, the speed control is a massive help?
Yeah, I mean, the speed control, probably, the children tend to come in and whack it up,
yes.
to maximum.
They do, yes, they do.
And then the adults come in the evening and turn it down to a minimum. But when I say to them, I might be in the kitchen, I can hear the machines, and I'll be able to identify his machine, and I'll say, Emily, go slower.
Slow down, yes.
So she'll just turn the speed down. And they know if they're trying to go around maybe an applique piece and they go around a circle, something's a little bit difficult, they know they can slow down. So it does make a big difference.
And also not having to use the foot pedal for the younger ones who might not be able to reach.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the younger children have only ever used the start-stop button. They don't use the foot pedal at all. And as they go through and as they grow up, they won't use the start-stop. They'll just carry on without. Whereas certainly it's very unusual for an adult to not use the foot pedal at some point.
Okay, should we get started?
Let's get started.
Okay.
Right, so the first thing we're going to do is we pick a fabric. So you just pick any fabric. I'm going to pick one of these nice bears on, and you're just going to cut a piece of any size. So let's say about 10 centimetres long, maybe 7.
That fabric is fun, isn't it?
And you can
It's
use
so cute.
lots of little bits of fabric for this. And we're just going to pop it around and about in the middle. You don't even have to be that precise. You take it to your machine. And because we've got some wadding here, I've lengthened the stitch. And we're just going to sew lines. So what this allows me to do is I can see if they know how to put the presser foot up and down. Do they have an idea? Can they pick up how to change the stitch lengths? And also, can they sew in a straight line? Do they understand that once you've sewn one line, you can use that line to create other parallel lines?
Okay. Now, Gill, some people watching this might be thinking, you have the patience of a saint working with children. You love working with children, don't you? And inspiring them. So what is it about that new generation, that next generation of sewers that you love so much?
I think I'm really lucky in that if you're coming to a sewing class, you're probably interested in sewing.
Yeah, so you've got them already.
So they're already interested. I guess the one thing that you have to be careful is they'll often come and say, I want to make a backless, strapless ball gown as their first outfit.
Quite ambitious.
And often you'll have a parent phone you and say, my daughter's so creative and she wants to make a backless, strapless ball gown. It's not something that I've been asked, I've been asked multiple times.
Yeah.
And you have to just sort of lead them into things. So you have to show them why they need to learn the way we're learning.
Yes, back to the basics
because
first.
If they fail too quickly, they're not going to be happy. So you can see I'm just going back and forth to create.
So this is why it's important to start with realistic projects and do them well.
That's right.
So you sort of maintain that interest and that sense of achievement as well for young people.
And sometimes when the children are able to do quite complex projects quite quickly, what they're not able to do is cut out and prepare everything well. Okay, so you've got them and you've got their energy. And remember, normally it's the end of their school day that you've got them. And so for the little ones, you will cut out for them and you will prepare everything and they'll have little packs. Right? But as they get older, as they get into senior school, they have to start doing some of that prep themselves and they have to realise that that's part of the sewing process.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's spoon feeding, but allowing them to see what they can make and understand that I'm doing a little bit of the process for them. But once they're able, they can do that too.
Yeah.
So it doesn't hold back their creativity. They can still be really, really creative and do quite complex things, even if they're 9 or 10.
I bet parents love this, that their child is perhaps away from the television or not on a device, but they're creating something, they're being crafty and creating something.
Yeah,
and,
I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I'm sure, craft is a bit like Pilates for the brain. You know, you're using a slightly different area of your brain, I think. And the kids, what I see with the children that come to my classes is very different from being in a school environment. In that if you are very successful in an academic environment and if you have more special educational needs, it doesn't matter in a sewing room. So the kids that are more able often find, in an academic environment, often find that this is a lovely release. They're not having to think constantly. And for those that maybe find school more challenging, they're finding that sewing is something they can do. Sewing something that they can feel that they can achieve. They can go home and they can take something they can be proud of.
Yes.
And it is so nice. And everybody's on that level playing field. And you also find that in those small sewing groups, they form bonds and they carry on with those bonds right the way throughout. So I have a junior sewing bee that's been with me. I keep saying it's going to be my last junior sewing bee because they stay, but I have a junior sewing bee and they don't want to be in any other group. And they want to carry on being called the junior sewing bee, even though they're all now at senior school. So
that must be so lovely for you. It's so rewarding as well that they want to stay with you. So what's the next stage?
Okay, next stage.
Jill?
So we've got our first piece on here. Now I've just cut a piece that's going to go on my second piece. So I'm going to do, if you like, if it's a clock at 3 o'clock, I'm going to fold it over so it's right sides together, just like normal sewing, and I'm going to sew down here. Again, with this, because we're just practicing, and we're testing. There's no need for you to work on a seam allowance, but I would always get the children to use the edge of their foot as their seam allowance, which is about 3/8 of an inch. That first line will just secure that piece on, and you can flip it out and press it down with your fingers. There's no need to go to the ironing board. And then we're going to sew our quilting stitches on again, but this time they'll just be parallel with the seam, so they're the same orientation as the seam, so the kids understand, just put that seam on and all my lines are going to go down this way.
So far, Jill, nothing too daunting. This is, I think I could do this, and that's the point, isn't it? It has to be accessible and easy for starters.
Yeah, it has to be accessible, it has to be easy. So during the pandemic, I did a project very similar to this, where I was able to send up some pieces of fabric, but getting hold of wadding was tricky and it was a bit more bulky. So what we did is we used old tea towels, and so we were able to access lots of old tea towels, and we could do this project very simply, using old tea towels as the base to give the bag structure.
What a great idea. So how does tutoring online compare to in person?
Tutoring online with children is a little bit tougher. It depends if you know the children. So through the pandemic, my regular sewing classes, including the children's classes, all carried on because I knew them, I knew their ability. I was able to either give them or lend them equipment. And my husband acted as goods out, and he dropped off little packages to doorsteps all over Maidenhead and that sort of area of Berkshire so that the classes could continue. I think it's more challenging if you don't know them. I think when they're older, so when you get to sort of GCSE or A level, it's much easier to teach them online because they have a baseline of ability that you can rely on.
For any parents watching this, I think their child saying, I want to do this, I want to start drumming, I want to start sewing, whatever. And that commitment, making that huge commitment of buying, all the equipment that you need. Is there an expectation then with the children that you tutor that they must have a sewing machine at home as well?
No, many of them wouldn't have a sewing machine at home, and I try and make the classes as accessible as possible. And I work with some local schools to make sure that if there are children who would benefit from sewing classes, but wouldn't find themselves in the position to do so, then we work something out.
Yeah.
So they don't need to have a sewing machine, but the most frequent question I'm asked by parents is, what type of sewing machine should I get them?
Yeah.
It's Christmas or it's
and
their
what do you
birthday.
tell them?
Well, I tell them that they need that I try and find a balance between simplicity and functionality, because most of the kids will carry on sewing right the way up and through. So if they're looking for a machine when they're 10 or 11, that could well be the machine they're going to be used for A levels or even sewing when they get older. So you're looking for that balance, and you're also looking at a cost point. So it depends on the people, but parents also want to know what will happen if my child gives up. Can I resell it? So I would generally always recommend this machine, because it will, like I said earlier, it will get you absolutely through A level, through your degree. You'll be knocking out bags and coats forevermore with something like this. It's top loading. That's really important when they're little, and often the cheaper machines aren't top loading, yet top loading is important. It's what they're learning on, it's what they will probably use in schools if they have access to machines. And they can see what's happening, and actually that visual part of sewing is very important for them to understand what's happening. So yeah, when I get asked, this is my preferred machine.
Brilliant, excellent. So 2 pieces of fabric in place now,
So
and you're just building and building.
Working around.
Can I just ask, I've noticed that you sew in the same direction every time. When you're teaching the children, is that the way you teach that? Because quite often people will sew down one, turn and come back again.
I think, so I've got to say that I have a very nice machine at home, which is another Janome, and it has a thread cutter on it. So I have a little bit of a habit of carrying on the same direction. If the children are doing it, then what we would do is we will put this piece on and they would sew down one side, I'll do it now, and then just turn around and sew back up the other. They won't cut the thread. So let me do that. It's a good point. I'm a bit spoiled. So it's the first one on, and we can just open it up. And now we're going to be doing our stitches down this way.
Once children learn these skills, how many stick with it, would you say, for the rest of their lives?
I think it's one of those things, a bit like, I think a little bit like music, that even if you stop doing it and you maybe go and do a degree in something different or get a job and it's not quite your thing, once you've got that skill, you can always go back to it. So it's really vital. I know that one of the A-level students, year 13 student called Grace, who I teach, she comes in on my A-level kids come in on a Friday evening, and the first thing she's always doing is fixing clothes for her evening out that night. And if it's not hers, it's her twin sisters or her friends that she's fixing. So she's already in that mode of, I can fix it and then I'll get on with my project.
Fantastic. What an amazing skill to have as well.
Yeah.
I bet she's popular with her sister.
She's very popular. You also find that, I think I mentioned earlier, that the groups bond quite well together. And that's actually really important, especially when you're sort of in your late primary school, your early secondary school, because that's when, those social bonds are sort of broken and reformed, and there's lots of sort of arguing in friendship groups and things, and yet they come back to sewing once a week. And they're all chatting about the injustices that have happened to them that week. And they all know about each other's friends. They're all asking, what did Maisie do to you this week? Or what did your brother do? How did he react when this happened? So it's a real little tight little groups that are formed. Very, very much like in the adult groups as well.
It's looking good.
Looking good. There's some bigger pieces.
So Jill, thinking back to my childhood, my mum used to try and teach me how to sew, and she didn't have much patience at all, so I didn't really look forward to those lessons. Is there a benefit of going to somebody out of the home, somebody like you, teaching a child these skills?
I think
Are they more likely to listen to you, is what I'm saying.
I don't know whether they're more likely to listen to me. I think they're less likely to be stroppy with me. But I actually think the big benefit is doing it within a group. I think if I was doing lots of one-to-one lessons, maybe they wouldn't be quite so successful. So the magic is not necessarily my lessons, it's the magic of bringing together those children who all want to sew. Yeah. They all want to, they're interested in, to begin with, in a small group and a younger group, you would have everybody doing the same thing, because that's, from a safety point of view, it's much easier to keep an eye on. But very quickly, they'll all start doing different projects, and they're all very invested in each other's projects and what's happening, what stage they're at.
And Very small children are very eager to please, aren't they? And they want to do everything right. But I imagine as children get older, there's a little bit of competitiveness as well, which is good. It's healthy, right?
Yeah, the older ones tend to want to show their parents what they've done. The little ones are just so excited.
Oh.
So my little Monday nights group, they made Halloween bunting this term, and there's twins in that class actually, and just they wrap them each other up in their bunting. They're just lovely, lovely kids. And then the next project last term was making plushies, and we made plushie.
What are plushies?
Plushies are like little soft toys, really snuggly soft toys, and we made plushie dolphins.
Oh, cute.
So yeah, so they made 2 plushie dolphins each, and that was good fun, and they loved that. They were so excited. They were pulsating. It's like a little, little cartoon squiggle of excitement coming in to the house.
Oh, that must be infectious for you.
Oh, it's lovely. It really is lovely. It lights up. It lights up the house, to be honest. And my husband is sometimes there on a Monday with these little ones, and he knows a couple of them anyway. But he says that all he can hear is the giggling and the laughing, and then we stop for treats. We always have a treat bowl. We stop for treats halfway through.
I want to sign up to one of your courses. So after something like this, a project like this, what would be the next level then for more grown-up children?
So I've got a couple. They may, to begin with, depending on how well they can sew, and how much patience and focus they have, because that develops as well over time. They may decide they want to go into dressmaking. Lots and lots of kids, especially post-pandemic, want to do dressmaking, by far more than previously, I think, and certainly in my classes. So when they're dressmaking, they have to start to learn how to trace the pattern, and so we probably start with that. Otherwise, making bags and making cushions are the way to start them. Just start to move them up into slightly bigger projects, slightly more complex. But I brought along a couple of samples I'll show you later of where you can take this project and just develop it without actually having to do very much more. You just start to use different stitches and different ways in which to use the sewing machine.
So how much are you led by the children that come along to your classes? If they come in saying, I've got this idea for a project, how much do you sort of help facilitate that?
Pretty much 100%.
Yeah.
Pretty much 100%. So the little ones, I tend to, because sometimes it's hard for them to think about what type of projects they could even do.
Yes.
Because their minds aren't open enough. So I'll have a book, and they'll flick through the book of projects, and they'll pick one. And if they've all picked a different one, either we do them in order, so we have to pull matchsticks or something to decide who goes first.
Very democratic.
Yeah, it's all big democracy. And or they'll vote.
Yeah.
So we have a vote. So
That's so
for the
sweet.
teeny weeny ones, that's how we do it, because I try and keep them all doing the same thing. Then when they get to sort of year 6, year 7, so they're sort of 11-ish, then we would start to break away, and they'd all start to, especially if they've been with me for a couple of years, they're quite opinionated about what they want to do, and so they will start to all do different projects, and I try and have everything available, and I also make sure that they have the right tools, because it makes their projects more professional and it makes it easier for them to succeed.
So what is the perfect age for a child to start learning how to sew?
Well, for me, as a teacher, I tend to take them when they're 9.
Yeah.
So sort of year 4, year 5, because they've got enough focus that they can do something, and I'm not so worried about them using the machines, because as well as the machines, as soon as they arrive, they have to know how to use an iron. You know? They get to know very quickly how to use a rotary cutter, so they might only be 9 or 10, but I'm teaching them these skills because they can do it.
Yeah, as a parent, these are all quite scary tools, aren't they? You know,
They are.
talking about an iron and potentially a sewing machine, and I can see why you need them to be quite mature.
The kids all know that even if I shouted fire, the first thing, even if I shout fire, they take their foot off the pedal, or they turn the machine off before they look up.
So there's a few house rules before you get going.
Yeah, that's a big house rule. You never take your eye away from your sewing machine when you're sewing, or you'll hurt yourself, and that would be bad.
So just to explain, we've jumped ahead. Gill, what have you done?
So I've just finished off, carried on completing that piece of like fabric we're making really, because we've sewn these little bits onto our fabric back. So we have the bits here. And then I've just trimmed it down. So earlier on I'd made a second piece. So I've got 2 sides and I've got my 2 linings all ready to go. They're all the same size now. So what I need to do is just join them together and with a zip and make up the pouch.
Okay, so join them together, add a zip.
Add a zip, exactly. So the first thing is to get the zip right. So I tend to use larger zips. So I tend to use bag making zips with children because they're chunkier. Not the ones with really, really chunky coils, but just normal nylon zips that are a little bit wider because it's easier for them to sew. And we would cut this zip down so it was about 1 centimetre shorter on either end, so 2 centimetres overall, than your actual size of your...
Can I ask a silly question? How do you cut a zip down?
If it's a nylon zip, you wouldn't use your dressmaking scissors or your proper scissors, you would use just general all-purpose scissors.
That would just go straight through?
Yeah, because we can sew through them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to put some little tab ends. So the ends just make it easier for us to sew the zip in later, and it also makes it look neater. And they're just little pieces of fabric, and I've just folded them in half, and I'm just going to put one on one end and one on the other. So it's just as simple as this, and I'm just going to sew across them. So I use a lot of clips rather than pins. The children like the clips. On a day when they are not very focused, they'll all be making themselves crowns with clips.
They're less fiddly than pins, aren't they?
Yeah,
and
they
then you
don't-
always end up pricking
Yeah.
yourself. But yeah, they're great. They're really fun as well.
Yeah, they're much easier to use for the other
Especially for the
hands.
children with dexterity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once you've got your ends on, we're just going to pop them in the sewing machine and sew over. And just like you said, these are nylon zips, so you can cut them, and you can sew over them. Just go carefully, but I always use a Janome purple tip needle. They're just incredible. That's one end of my zip done. So these are both ends of my zips now are covered in a little bit of fabric, which will make it just easier for them to be sewn in now. So now we can construct the bag really quickly.
You teach adults as well, don't you?
I do.
Who do you prefer then, kids or adults?
Well, it can depend. Towards the end of a half term, it's normally the adults I prefer. But the kids are just so full of excitement.
Yeah.
Every week there's something exciting, and it can be something that's happening in their life, or they may just be really, really excited about a project. I've got 2 girls who are in year 9, so what would that be? They're about 13, 14, and they're doing a competition quilt at the moment, or they're doing a quilt that they will enter into a competition next year, whether it's the Festival of Quilts or a different one, maybe Malvern. And they are so excited by the fact they're working together on this quilt, and they want to use yellow fabrics. So we've done a lot of shopping, which I'm very well qualified for shopping, buying fabrics for them, adding to my stash of fabrics, and they've really enjoyed it. And they come in and they're so enthusiastic. You just can't beat. It's like a real tonic.
And what about picking up stuff as well? Are children generally quicker at learning techniques than adults? Because, it takes a bit longer, doesn't it, for our brains to work?
They can be. I'm just changing to a zipper foot. They can be quicker, but it can just depend if they're tired. Yeah, so it will just depend on how old they are, how tired they are. So what I've done here, let me just, because I'm doing this because it's natural to me, I've got my exterior piece, and I've got my zip facing down, and I've got my piece of lining facing down on top, and I've clipped it along here with all those raw edges aligned. And I'm pop my zipper foot on.
I was going to say, do you find the children don't seem to worry about things like adults do either, do they? They just go with it. They don't try and analyse everything as to why.
Yeah,
They'll just go.
They also haven't picked up any bad habits.
True.
They don't really have a sense they can't do it either. Whereas adults do have a sense they can't do it. So, you know, it would take me longer to persuade an adult that they could do something than it takes a child where I just go, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Whereas an adult is like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, we're very good at talking ourselves out of things, aren't we?
I think the other thing about children is children are used to practicing.
Yeah.
So my daughter, Katie, used to plays the clarinet and used to practice for 10 minutes every day. And that was just what she did. And she became really good at it. But we think that we, as adults, will just sit down and be good at something without practice, whereas the kids have still got that, we've got to practice it because that's still coming from school.
Children have generally got more time than adults as well, so they can practice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm putting it down to. So you're going to carry on just all the way around now, are you?
I'm just going to sew this top bit on.
Okay.
That's one side. And then I'm going to repeat exactly the same on the other side and then sew all the way around. So
wow.
Let me show you how that finishes. So this is one side of my zip that has been now.
That's fantastic. Great job.
So one side is already on. By this point, the excitement is building.
Because you can see it all coming together. It's so exciting.
We just repeat the whole thing for the other side. So line up the top of the zip.
And you're going to sew this all together at the same time?
We're going to, all this side we'll be sewing on, and then we've got our final one stitch where we always count our stitches at this when they're little, how many more stitches until we finish. So we've got 2 lines of stitches until we're finished.
And this isn't too thick, all of these layers of fabric?
No. Depending on who they were, I might be using a walking foot with them when we start to, when we sew around it in a second. But generally, when they're really tiny, changing the foot and making it too complicated is too much. It's better just to put the stitch length up. If they were doing something larger, then yes, but for such a small project, no.
How many of your children start coming and wanting to make items to gift to other people?
Oh, constant. At this time of the year.
Christmas, coming up to Christmas.
But because Christmas, Easter, birthdays are all a really big thing with the children, so they do like to, and we often talk about what do we want to make? Do we want to gift it to somebody? But some of them are funny. Some of them are like, no. I want
I'll
it.
have that.
Yeah.
It's too good to give away.
No. Okay, so now, here we can see I've got a little bit of fabric that's got stuck on the back. Here we can see we've got our zip all in there in the middle. Happy days. And we're just going to finish off the bag by sewing the 2 outsides together and the 2 insides together. Okay. So you line it all up.
It is like a little puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, line it all up. Pop some clips on or some pins.
How long are your lessons usually with the children?
So the A-level lessons are 2 hours long, all the others are 1 hour, 1.5 hours, so 90 minutes.
Yeah, do you find the children, especially the younger ones, haven't got that focus for a very long time, have they?
Well, we split it up, so they do 45 minutes and then there's a treat. So you can hand sew or you could machine sew the ends, the bottom, the little hole that we've got in the bottom there. And there is your bag.
Voila.
Voila.
That's absolutely brilliant, Jill. Well done. Should we take it over to the discussion table and see what our experts make of it? Okay, let's go. Gill and I have returned to the discussion table to rejoin our experts. What did you think of the demonstration then?
It's fabulous, and it's a great way to engage children and get them being more creative. And also looking at these, it's a fabulous way that they can take the basic skills and then work on them to do different techniques. That's a fabulous way of doing that.
Anita, what do you think?
Well, I loved the fact that the project was easily completable because most children don't want to have something that's going to take them forever to complete. They lose focus, they're bored.
Yes, yeah.
So having something that they can complete was wonderful. The other thing I also felt that I used to teach very young children, and we always used to need an extension to what we'd actually taught them. How does that work for you, Gill?
If you want to, you can carry on with this type of project and extend it and make it slightly more challenging, or introduce new skills. So this is a second one that I've done. There's 2 other extensions. So this one, they have put some decorated stitches in here. Okay, so they've started to explore what the sewing machine can do on both sides, but also where we were just using the edge of our foot to get our seam allowance here they've had to be precise about their seam allowance, so they get this nice 1/4 inch seam allowance and the crosses and points all meeting.
Yeah, those points are wonderful.
And then the next stage on from there is sort of to develop an idea about a picture. So what would be a picture? And I might give them 3 or 4 different pictures. I've often given them, pictures that I like. This was one up in Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, and they will start to look at making up a landscape. And also this one has got some ribbon in there, and it's also got some beading. So you can start to develop more and more of your ideas and creativity and start to merge your art world with your sewing world.
Yeah, and you've got lots of techniques in there. I can see there's some raw edge applique as well as the different quilting and that in there.
And again, are these strong beads? So you pop them on with the beading foot.
Put them on with the beading foot. So they've been using,
Gill, a fun and achievable project. I think the kids are going to love it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Jane and Anita, as always. And thank you very much for joining us today at the Makers Studio. See you soon.